Oh, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining again this week. We're continuing on this week with our sales discussion. We're going to talk actually more about snow sales than landscape sales. I think my title might be a little bit deceiving here. Go ahead and let me know where you're from, who you are, where you're from over in the chat. It's always great to see where people are signing on from each day. I'm down in Atlanta for the Lawn and Landscape Top 100 and Technology Conference this week. So had a chance to speak this morning to a great group about lean, and we've got a couple of other exciting things on while we're down here as well. So going to get started here. Thanks for, we got quite a few people from all over here today. That's great. I'm going to get started here. We're going to talk about cold calling techniques specifically for snow this week. I'm going to talk to this. Going to definitely follow some principles that I learned many years ago from the Jeffrey Gitomer's Sales Bible. I always like to kind of give credit where credit's due. That is an outstanding book that I highly recommend. It's a little bit more generic than what we're covering, but certainly really, really valuable info. So if you haven't had a chance to pick up that book, definitely would recommend that. So for this week, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about cold calling. This, of course, can apply to many, many different aspects of the green industry. Today, we're going to talk about snow just because it's that time of year. Most of the snow sales ideally take place between June, July, August, but truthfully, they usually stretch into September and October. As much as we don't like that as landscape and snow professionals, but the reality is it is the selling season, and like any business, you should be selling year round, but snow is certainly heating up. It's that time of year where we have to get out there and book some big business for the winter. And unfortunately, I am hearing from many, many contractors that the demand for a lot of the summer work was down a little bit, particularly those that have been doing a lot of install, people doing swimming pools, lots of projects like that, really seeing a little bit of a decline in demand. And so hearing a lot of people starting to really think a little bit more about doubling down on the snow sales and growing the snow business. So unfortunately, that might mean it's a bit competitive. So I think you want to be better than your competitors at using cold calling as a technique. I think it's super powerful way to grow your snow business for many, many different reasons. One being, you can't really count on referrals in the commercial snow business. Another, at the end of the day, oftentimes the most profitable snow companies are the snow companies that have really, really dense routes. And if you're not doing outbound sales, it would be next to impossible to really get that density that is ideal when doing snow, so that you can use bigger equipment and cover a lot more ground with fewer employees. And so when you do get really good at doing this, ideally you'll get such dense routes that you might be able to, go into one street and plow 30 buildings with a big front end loader rather than 4 or 5 trucks. And so things get much more profitable. Revenue per hour goes way up when you've got that density. And managing the storms, of course, gets much easier when you've got more work in a concentrated area. So more reasons even beyond that, but I won't cover them all today. But definitely what we want to do here is get really focused on deciding who we're about to speak to when we do outbound calls, which means we have to be really clear on our ideal customer profile. If you missed this session a few weeks back, you can watch it on one of the replays on YouTube or on the Landscape Disruptors podcast series. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here is really double down and decide exactly what ICP we're looking to service. And then when we start making these outbound calls, we want to be really clear on who we're about to call by doing a little research. And of course, we want to understand, their main goals, how they kind of do business normally. And of course, more important than anything, we want to know their pain points and challenges before we get on the phone with them so that we're kind of prepared with our compelling questions and statements. And we're kind of ready to answer the known objections that they're likely to have. And so when you actually build these ICPs and do some training with anybody who's going to do any outbound calling, you get really proactive about understanding what these pain points are so that when you get on the phone, everything just kind of flows well and you get much, much better conversion rates from your phone calls through to meetings or proposals. So, the common pain points that this Class A office park manager is likely to have as a property manager, a little bit different than other buildings, like maybe an automotive parts plant or a hospital or an institutional property like a college or a high school. And so when we start asking questions and we start trying to really connect and uncover the pain points and establish ourselves as the expert, we've got to make sure that our questions kind of speak to their pain points and challenges. And that's really what we want to get really, really good at through some practice and some role play with others in the company that might be doing some selling as well. And I always say it's just as good to be the customer when role playing and practicing as it is to be the salesperson, because you kind of get into the shoes of that buyer and you kind of, I think, learn to empathize with those pain points and even understand how you're being perceived as a salesperson when being sold. So pain points and challenges that we're going to think of today in this example that I'm going to go through. Obviously this property manager is going to have to deal with all kinds of tenants, and tenants like to complain. So they're trying to avoid those complaints by finding somebody with better service quality than they've had in the past. They've got usually some environmental and safety compliance issues. Safety is usually a big one, particularly in office parks like this. They need somebody that's super reliable. For sure, if they've been hiring snow contractors in the past, they've had somebody that didn't show up on time or didn't show up at all. And so this is always a big concern for them. Cost management, very, very unexpected billing based on, maybe a lack of accuracy in the billing or a lack of communication and getting approvals for extras, things like that. So there's always a lot of concern there because these people have to manage a budget. And when they're going to go over budget, they need to get approvals and they don't like surprises. So we want to be aware of that. Risk management and insurance coverage. There's lots of issues around contracts, lawsuits, slip and falls. So we want to be able to speak to that as clearly as possible. Typically, there's going to be lots of communication problems from the past that you need to overcome or can even utilize to upend an existing supplier. Issues around just notifying them of what plans are when storms are coming in or what was done after a storm. Things around scheduling in general, preseason inspections, postseason inspections, repairs in the spring. There's many, many things that often pop up around scheduling that are pretty serious pain points that I think really set us up to differentiate ourselves as being better than everybody else. And last, of course, is service verification and billing. I think one of the largest pain points I heard over the years was service verification. You say you were here, but not so sure that you were actually here. It doesn't look like you even showed up, which when it's snowing super heavy all night long can appear that way, even though that's not the case. And so oftentimes there's a lot of stress and there's been some past disputes around service verification. So I like to take my time really thinking about this ICP before I ever start the phone call, because what I want to make sure that I'm really comfortable with what pain I'm actually trying to get them to talk about. And they're not going to talk about all of these, but one of these is going to kind of jump off the page. And when they really start to talk about their pain, it usually leads into a few others. And so sometimes two, three, four of these will emerge during the conversation. And what I want to be able to do is very quickly pivot to a compelling statement to let them know how we avoid that pain from existing when we service the property. And so we got really good at asking a question, giving a solution, question, solution, question, solution. What we don't want to do is just start telling them what makes us better without knowing what their current state is. And so this ICP gives us all the information we need to do that really effectively. So, over the years, I've often challenged people and I've said, what is your best lead source? And when I'm teaching workshops, doesn't seem to matter what city, state, or country I'm in, everybody says referrals. And referrals are great in certain types of areas of the work that we do. But let's be honest, referrals are not great in the snow plowing business. We're not going to grow the business at the pace we should, and we're not going to get the density in our routes if we're just waiting for the phone to ring. And so, unfortunately, this one has to become part of your playbook. So I usually challenge people in saying that, outbound phone calling or even like really, really targeted direct mail. And I don't mean like just postcards, but like really targeted direct mail with portfolios for swimming pools in the right neighborhoods and things like that have a big impact. So there's various ways of doing outbound cold calling and targeted marketing, but ultimately this getting really good at cold calling is a key component to growing a snow business. Oftentimes people wonder how these companies get to be 3, 4, or 5 million, or sometimes 30, 40, $50 million snow businesses. And it really does rely on an ability to target the right leads and understand how to prospect and where to find those leads. And then getting on the phone and really, really working those leads in a meaningful way. And so that's what I wanted to kind of cover here in more detail as we go through. Ultimately the outcome is we're looking for you to be a little more confident in approaching this. It doesn't have to be so uncomfortable when you practice, and when you practice some more role play, do some research. When you get on the phone, it's just not as uncomfortable as it probably is, or the way that you consider it when you don't have the framework to work off of. So, prep and research is key. You have to know who you're calling, and you got to know what you're calling them about. And so when we decide to open up a call, we want to know what their pain points are likely to be. We want to know what the big concerns are for that type of business. In this case, with the office park, we talked about those, but they'd be different. If it were a hospital, obviously we'd be super concerned with ambulances and public safety. If it's a car parts plant, we're super concerned with business interruption because there's just-in-time deliveries. If it's a school, we got to get the buses in and out safely, and we need the parking lots to be safe and the playground to be safe for the kids. And so there's always going to be slightly different needs and pain points, and how we address those with our compelling statements really needs to resonate with that prospect so that they quickly see you as the guide or the expert, trusted advisor that's going to help them avoid the problems that they've had in the past, or even the pain that they're dealing with in the moment, depending on the time of year. So we want a really good opening. We want to be as personal as possible, and that's why we want to do the research. When we open, we want to make sure that we can talk to that prospect like we know them. And so we want to be able to quickly get to the point in terms of like who we are, how we help people like them. I love having a statement. Hey, it's Mark from X Landscaping. I help people like you avoid what problem? I got to get right to it. And if I open up with that very quickly, they immediately know who you are, where you're from, and how you're supposed to be helping them. And the better you get at doing that, the more likely the call is going to continue. But if you're not really great at telling them how you help, I think right away it seems like you're asking them for something. And so we want to change the dialogue as quickly as possible and make sure that you can very quickly introduce yourself, your company, and how you help people like them. So I want to make it as short and sweet as I can. Ideally, we want to have something in mind in terms of like either something a little humorous, maybe there's some kind of like event that's happened. It could be the weather, it could be something that's happening, politically, who knows? I try to avoid politics as much as possible, but there could be some kind of a little humorous thing that's happened in the world that we could throw in. And ultimately, then we want to kind of get into talking about like as quickly as possible, talking with them about what their pain points are currently. And so we want to be able to ask really good questions, and I'll get into those questions here in a minute. We want to make sure that we can offer our help. And really, as we're asking the questions, make sure that there's an opportunity for within your questions to ask them, would that be better? Or would that help you? Or would that solve your problem? And so we want to be very good at doing that. And again, that's why role play training is just so powerful. We want to be able to very quickly connect with people. And if we practice over and over and over, and we kind of challenge each other, stump each other in role play training, it's almost, becomes like autopilot. It's like anything else, riding a bike. We just know what to say. It just kind of flows. So again, as we research, we want to make sure that we understand the persona. First line is going to tell them who we are, what we do, and how we help them. And we want to be confident in delivering that. So we want to practice that in itself every time. I want to be able to just say my name, where I'm from, and how I help them without any hesitation. And if you get really good at that, I think, you'll use that in person. You'll use that as an elevator pitch. You'll use it when you, are even just describing to friends or acquaintances what you do for a living. It just becomes something that is a part of you. And I think many times we're not really that great at doing that. Getting, over some of the fear of cold calling, I think comes with a lot of practice. And, I've definitely seen a lot of people go from hating cold calling to actually kind of enjoying it. Ultimately, when you're good at this, it becomes a bit of a conversation. And if you like to talk to people, it shouldn't be something that you're feeling uncomfortable about. It doesn't have to be annoying. I think the faster you convince them that you help people in their position in one way or the other, the more natural it becomes. And that's why it's so important to get there so fast off the start. Now, ultimately, we have to start asking these like powerful, compelling questions in order to uncover need. And what we're doing is we're just gathering information with these questions. So just kind of make sure that you remember you're on the phone, you're just trying to get as much information as you can so that you can actually start to describe how you solve those problems and add value differently than maybe something they've had in the past. And so when we get through our initial introduction, I think it's important to start to ask these power questions as quickly as possible. Again, we're on the phone, and it's never easy to establish value on the phone on a cold call so early in a relationship. But as we ask the quick questions, we want to make sure that we've got our quick selling points. What is it that we're going to emphasize that's going to start to build a little momentum? Because all cold calls end up without any momentum, and your first and second question I think, are what really either fill the tank or empty the tank. They know that you're there to help. You already told them that. What two questions are we going to start with that are just going to create enough of an engaging conversation that they don't try to get you off the phone? And once we get through those two, then I find it's usually pretty easy to keep building more momentum from there. So the questions are going to be very specific to their needs, their pain points, their priorities. That's why we want to have done the research. In the case of this specific snow customer, that the office park manager, I'm going to be asking questions very specific to their market, but with these generic areas. And so understanding their current challenges is just an area. I want to start here, though. This is going to be the first theme of questions. Now, this could be, again, we're going to always vary these based on the persona, but here I could be leading with understanding if they even have a contractor. So my first question could be, hey, do you have a contractor right now, or have you selected a contractor for the coming winter? And if the answer is yes, I've got to overcome that. I've got to make sure they understand why they should keep talking to me, even though they've already got somebody in mind. If they say, yeah, we've got somebody, I want to try to poke at that a little bit and say, oh, okay, great. I totally understand if you're already taken care of. How's everything going with your service right now? So I kind of pivot and keep the question going. I don't just say, okay, and hang up the phone. And so oftentimes that's when they'll start talking a little bit. And now it's my opportunity to poke a little bit further and see if there's anything that they're not satisfied with. And so my questions need to be pretty specific. And for this property manager, I want to make sure that they really tie into, known pain points for them. Any issues with your current service? Is the billing accurate? They're showing up when they say, are your customers happy? Is there anything that you'd like to see them doing better? And when you poke around a little bit like that, usually that pain comes to the surface for them. They let you know what it is, and that's your opportunity to kind of come over the top and share something that differentiates you from the pain that they're already dealing with their current or past contractor. Assessing impact on the business. This one, again, with our research, we want to get a good idea of what that impact could be. And so, like I said, in this case, it's an office park. We know what the problems are in an office park. So when we start to ask questions about impact on business, we tune it very specifically to them. We don't just say, how does snow and ice impact your business operations? We start talking specifically about things that we think would happen in their office, or in their office park. So if we've got a business that is operating, let's say, in the office park that's in the insurance business, and there's 500 cars that show up each morning, we should be talking about that. Hey, I'm sure that 8 o'clock around here in the morning is exceptionally busy, just being filled with office folks, and then explain something that gets them talking about the fact that they've got some issues around 8 o'clock in the morning after a snowfall. All we want them to do is say, yeah, you know what, typically we've had some pretty rough mornings around here where the parking lots aren't plowed yet. That's your chance to come back and explain how you make sure that the lot is always plowed with dedicated equipment parked on the site and larger plows that can cover the entire parking lot in an hour and a half. And you're not relying on small pickup trucks. And there's very specific ways to address it, but we need to get them to tell us, what the pain point is. And once we kind of know what that impact is on the business, if the snow isn't dealt with, then we can just kind of poke around there as much as we need to kind of keep going. Did I mention methods to find and get in contact with property managers? I find it's the hardest thing to get their information. Property management associations is one. You can buy lists from many, many different business list companies. There's market research companies that have very detailed lists. There's some pretty cool products on the market now, like AI products that will serve up company names, addresses, emails, all of the contacts within the company. They're, I'm sure they're just scraping the websites as quickly as possible, but you can, pay for subscriptions for software products now where you basically fill out your ICP, the types of roles that people would have that you're looking to connect with, and then you can get hundreds and hundreds of leads downloaded, in minutes. So there's lots of different ways to prospect these days, but you're spot on there, Russ. There's definitely one of the most painful things of cold calling historically has been digging around online trying to figure out who the right person to talk to is. But I think that's gotten easier than ever for sure. The next big area that I'd focus on with these compelling questions and statements is really just getting them to start talking about what they actually need. And so when we talk about business impact, like I just did about the timing of the snowfalls, for example, or plowing, next I want to start to poke around a little bit more and ask them, what good looks like. On a perfect service, what would happen? Do you know what good looks like? And when they start to tell you in one way, shape, or another, I feel like it gets really easy for you to start coming back with compelling statements about how you do things differently. We use loaders to service your property rather than pickup trucks. We pre-treat your parking lot so that the ice doesn't ever really bond to the surface. We provide proactive updates early in the afternoon every day to let you know what the weather's expected to do that evening. And then we update anytime we dispatch our crews, and we update when we leave the property. Like, we can really kind of go wherever we need to go when we're really talking about service needs once they tell us what they expect. And we want to get this property manager to describe to us all of their problems while they're kind of telling us their service needs. Typically I've had problems hearing from the contractor when morning rush hits and the snow's not plowed, nobody picks up the phone. When I get my billing, it's never very clear, and it feels like I've been billed for too many salt applications, and there's no detail as to what time they were there. They just tell me they salted my parking lot three times within 2 days, and I can't figure out why. We want them to tell us these things so that we can explain how we service the properties differently and what kind of makes us different than everybody else. So these service need questions, we got to be good at doing this. And it's never really one question. These are kind of like themes, and we want to be able to kind of ebb and flow a bit, but ultimately unpack the service needs. Then we want to kind of ask questions that are really focused around budget. We want to wrap around to the fact that we can solve any business problem when it comes to plowing snow, but we want to kind of understand if there's any budget constraints when making a decision. Ultimately what we're trying to understand is what snow plowing is worth to this specific customer. Now, I always say that the bigger their business loss, or the more liability that they have, or the more opportunity there is for property damage or lost income or lost tenants, the more likely they're going to spend more money on our service. And so we want to kind of really uncover that. That's like us asking, hey, is there any major concerns on the property? Anything that you really don't want to happen? Like, if we had a major snowstorm, what's the worst thing that could go wrong that you need us to make sure never happens? And what we're trying to do is get them to tell us about potential financial losses. And we want them to tell us about what would happen if their business shut down, if people couldn't get into the office, if there was a slip and fall. We want them to tell us about how expensive their granite sidewalks are. And if we use the wrong equipment, we're going to ruin them. Like, we want those conversations to come out, and we want to ask really good questions to get them talking about these things. And then ultimately what we want to do is kind of come back to their service expectations, really make sure that we get the exact details. We need the snow plowed every time before 7 a.m. We can't not have the snow plowed. Understood? It might still be snowing, but we need the whole place plowed before 7. We always want to pre-treat. We always want to be using salt. We always want to remove the snow every time it snows because we need every parking spot. We just want these types of facts to come out with our questions. And so we got to be good at asking and prompting those things, because we always have to remember we're the expert. They don't think of all of these things. So we got to be able to kind of poke at these things and ask a few questions. And as we're doing that, they're really starting to trust us more because they can see that we understand what their pain points are or could be. And they can see that we're being really proactive, and then even layering in some solutions and explaining what differentiates us at each stage. And again, once you get through the first 2 questions, I feel like by the time you get to number 5 here, you're usually really starting to vibe with this person and help them. And that's really ultimately what you want as you roll into these objections. Now, when we get into the objections, they might come back to you and say, hey, we already have a service provider, or I don't think we're really interested in taking quotes right now. And again, when you role play, you get good at coming back on these rather than just saying, oh, okay, and letting it stop. We can kind of turn that into something positive. And, if we've already got the service provider, you can, after already hearing what you've heard, you can say, well, it sounds like there might be a few gaps in the service level. I'd love to give you a proposal and show you what it would cost for us to do this. And hey, it's okay if it doesn't work right now, but I'd still love to give you this proposal so that you can consider us in the future. And in my own experience, I've been pleasantly surprised at how often somebody's told me they have somebody and we end up with the work. And it's just showing what makes you better or easier to deal with, or what makes their life easier because they're dealing with you. And so really ultimately what I want to do here is keep the conversation rolling. I want to hear what they've got to say. Most of the time, what I'm trying to do is figure out exactly what that objection is, and I want time to frame my answer, but I want to kind of repeat it back to them, make sure that I've got it right, and kind of make sure that that's it. Yeah, is there anything else? Is it just that you've already got somebody? Like, is there any other concern? And once they let you know exactly what that one concern is, or maybe there is 2, and you really utilize that objection to actually drive more authority and establish yourself as an expert even more, it's usually pretty easy to actually go from that final objection or 2 through to the next big question, which is, in this case, it's usually asking for a meeting or just asking them to accept a proposal. So they've given me the objection. I've given them the answer. Now it's time for me to just simply move forward and ask if it's possible for us to have that meeting. And if they don't want the meeting, maybe I'll still recommend that at least I'll send you over a proposal. You can take a look at it. And then if you're interested, we could have a meeting after that. But I'm still kind of trying to move things forward as much as possible. All right. As we get through to that close, as I said, what we want to be able to do really, really well is definitely want to ask exactly what it's going to take to book them in for a meeting or accept a quote. So I want to get an email address confirmation if they just want a quote sent over. That's not ideal. We want the meeting. But what I'm really trying to do is confirm what that next step is, get something in writing, send them a quick email back, send them a confirmation of the meeting, send them a quick confirmation letting them know that if it was just, say, a quote, that when that quote's going to come in, I'll be sure to get that to you by the end of the day tomorrow. But I want to be able to understand exactly what the next step is and then communicate that next step to the prospect right there and then. And again, by scheduling the next step, there's an expectation, and we're already establishing ourselves as being much, much better communicators than the others. And so I think when we handle the close of this call really, really strongly, I think we actually put the momentum into the entire process. And so like we want we don't want to get off the phone without a yes or a no. And if we get a yes, then we want to make sure that we know exactly what the next step is. So ultimately, the sort of overview here is we want to say less. We want to use power questions that identify pain points. We want power statements that establish credibility. We want to make sure that while we're having this conversation, we're qualifying and we're making sure that there is a need for what we're selling, that they can make the decision, and that this company actually has the budget for what we're looking to provide. And then ultimately, we want to just make sure we gather enough information so that we can tell them what we need to tell them in order to differentiate ourselves and establish ourselves as experts. And then ultimately, we want to get to that yes or no. So always being prepared, always involving them in the presentation, making sure that we share things that are in writing. We want to tell stories about how we've helped others. We want to be able to use referrals and names of larger customers, ideally even in the same neighborhood, on the same street. I think on your website and even a PDF shareable list of other loyal customers that you can drop into the body of emails, whether it's just a link to your testimonials page. But ultimately, we want to make the whole thing feel as natural as possible, because, cold calling always feels awkward. And we all get cold calls from salespeople who are not well prepared, who don't have really, really good reasons to even be calling us. They don't understand our pain. They don't understand our business. They don't understand how they can help. It's just really somebody phoning us out of the blue to try to get something from us. And so what we have to be able to do as great salespeople is make sure that we establish that we're there to help them. And we can only do that if we do the research and we ask really good questions with really solid statements. What do we have there? Pain points. Pain points is such a good discussion. Hey, Brian, how you doing there? The discovery process about what they're looking for is incredibly powerful. No more guessing what they want. You let them tell you and then drill it in with a favorable proposal that takes on so much guesswork out of the conversation. Yeah, that's it. I should have just let you type that off the start, and then everybody wouldn't have had to listen to me. But thanks for throwing that in there, Brian. Any other questions? We've got a few more minutes here together, and if you've got any, I'll take them now and try to answer. If not, next week we're going to talk a little bit more about the sales process. We're going to talk about building rapport and building buyer confidence with prospects. The way that we're going to kind of talk through this is, I'm going to use some examples, and I'm going to kind of talk about specifically what I've found works really well when we're trying to just capture that initial rapport and that belief that we're an expert and that we should be at the table having a discussion. There's a bit of magic to that, whether it's on the phone or in person. slightly different, but ultimately we want to make sure that you can confidently talk to your prospects, knowing exactly how you're going to get that rapport and confidence before you ever walk into the room. All right. Mark, I assume we can apply the same techniques for landscape sales as well. That's a really good point. This is absolutely the same, right? We're going to come up with an ideal customer profile. We're going to know what their pain points are, and then we're going to approach it exactly the same way, just with different questions and different compelling statements. And ultimately what we're doing is we just figure out like what the target is, what their pain points look like, how to uncover them with good questions, how to convince them that we can solve those problems, and then ask for the close. The companies that grow the fastest are the best at doing this. It's really that simple. We're looking into expanding snow management systems. Wanted to say that was a comment. Thank you, Matt. That's great. I don't see any other questions. I think that's probably it for this week. Looking forward to chatting with everybody again next week. This fall, we do have the 2-day mastermind sessions are back. You can catch those on the website or click that QR code there. These are probably going to sell out relatively quickly. We're only doing 5 of the 2-day sessions in the fall and 6 this winter. Just having some scheduling and bandwidth issues. I teach these personally. I want to keep teaching them personally. So we're going to do slightly bigger venues and do fewer cities so that I'm not traveling as often as I was this past winter. So definitely sign up for those early. We've got some pretty exciting content coming up, very different than last year's 2-day mastermind. We're going to go in a little bit different direction, and I'll explain more about those in weeks to come. But those dates, November 7th, 8th on through to December 5th and 6th. Definitely try to get out to one of those if you can. And as always, if you follow along on LinkedIn and Instagram, I try to put some daily content out there as well. But good luck with all of your sales, whether it's snow, landscaping, landscape maintenance, residential, commercial. This is the same process with slightly different approach. So again, thanks everybody, and have a great afternoon.